Can you all hear me okay? I was laughing when I came up because that song, they asked me like what song do you want to come out to? And that is a song from the 90s. It's Semisonic Closing Time. And it has nothing to do with the book really, except that there's this line in the song that I keep thinking about, and it's like the famous line in the song is every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end, right? It's actually a really like clever piece of writing. But I never really reflected on it. It just happened to pop up on my Spotify playlist in the last 2 weeks. And one of the things that I realized was that it actually is it is the case that all of the companies that the PayPal mafia founded, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And the beginning's end that I spent 6 years studying was the story and the creation of PayPal and the lives of the people who constitute the PayPal mafia. And so that's the reason, because he asked for a hype song and I didn't have any other better ideas. So I appreciate the chance to be here. There, before I start, I actually just wanted to say thank you to Gonzalo and the team. Gonzalo's been my primary contact, but the reason I say that is because these events are enormously hard to put together. And it all looks easy when you are kind of drinking coffee and eating pop chips and hanging out and enjoying the speakers. But it takes like an endless amount of email and texting and 14 different methods of communication with the speakers and lining everything up and doing it all on a shoestring budget and having to like beg, borrow, and steal and get resources. It is an underfunded startup, and the IPO, which is today, is not really very lucrative. And so that's basically what we've got. And so I just want to like offer a round of applause to the people who helped to put this together. These things are very difficult to do. There's something particularly funny about today too, that Gonzalo could not have known and might not actually even know now, which is in a few hours there'll be another person who takes the stage, Michael Gibson. And Michael Gibson and I have a funny friendship and story. About a week ago, I looked at the schedule for the speakers and I saw his name and I shot Michael a text and I said, "Yo, are you speaking at Babson next week?" Same Michael Gibson. He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "I'm your warm-up act, man. I'm going on a couple hours before you." And the reason this is particularly funny is that before I had published The Founders, a friend of mine introduced me to Michael. He said, "Yeah, Michael's thinking about doing some books and stuff. He worked for Peter Thiel. He might have some insights onto your book because Peter Thiel is one of the subjects of your book because he's a co-founder of PayPal." So Michael and I get together in New York, we get some coffee, and right away, like I'm like, okay, this is like a brother from another mother. This is somebody that I will be friends with for the rest of my life, right? We love writing, we love entrepreneurship, we love these kinds of stories, and we start talking. And I tell him about my book, and then he tells me about an idea for his book that he had. And I was like, "You should write that book. That's an amazing book." And it was his personal story weaved together with the creation of the Thiel Fellowship. So Michael helped to create the Thiel Fellowship. So fast forward, it's early 2022, and my book is about to debut. I picked a debut date, by the way, that's eerily close to today, which is I did 2/22/22, which I just thought was sort of funny and interesting. So a couple months before that, I sent Michael a galley copy of the book. It's like an early copy of the book. And I sent him this galley and I was like, you don't need to say anything nice about it. I would just, you and I talked about the book. It's done. I figured you'd want to see an early copy. So he reads it. And then he didn't ask me to do this. He didn't ask me if he should do this or shouldn't. He just threw up a post on Twitter and he took a little copy, a photo of the book. And he said, "I was always surprised that there was not an origin story of PayPal written, given the people who were involved in its creation, Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, Peter Thiel, et cetera." He said, "But this book is," and then he said some nice things, like, "This book is really, really good." And he like tagged a few people on it. And one of the people he tagged was Elon. And this was pre-Elon's acquisition of Twitter, now known as X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. And he tagged Elon, and I didn't know this until my phone starts blowing up with text messages that Elon replied to Michael's tweet and said some really nice things about me, which was great. It was like I'd always had a little bit of anxiety during the writing of this book that one of the most powerful people in the world was going to hate something I had done or said to him or a question I had asked. But he replies to Michael and he says some really nice things. And the book kind of had, like, that's what elevated the book from, you know, this book I had been writing and kind of squirreling away on to now people were paying attention because somebody with, at that point, like I think 150, 100 million Twitter followers was like, yeah, Jimmy's okay. You know, that was like roughly that. And so it was a very funny thing because Michael, in a big way, helped to put the book on the map. The story's not over. Fast forward. A little while ago, sorry, it's been 2-3 years ago, Michael publishes his book. It's called Paper Belt on Fire. About a year after, under a year after the publication, Michael and I getting together again for coffee in New York. And I say to him, when's the paperback coming out? And he says, paperback, they're not going to do a paperback. They don't want to do a paperback, which is really a little weird in book world. In book world, typically what happens is you publish a book and then about a year later, they do a paperback version. It's a little bit of a lower cost product. It gives the book a second life. And some people just like have odd preferences. I'm sure everybody in this audience, some of you prefer audiobooks, some of you prefer Kindle books, some of you prefer hardcover, some of you prefer paperback. So I was like, that's really weird, man. Why aren't they doing a paperback? He's like, honestly, I don't know. But I knew enough about publishing at that point to know that was really weird. I was also at the time building a team that today is the startup venture that I'm a part of. I'm the co-founder and CEO of what's called Infinite Books. And I just thought there was a ton of stuff wrong in the publishing industry. And instead of complaining about it, I was just going to come in and change it completely. And so I said to him, hey, here's a crazy idea. What if I go to your publisher and try to acquire the rights for the paperback? And then we like make it a big thing and we like do this thing. And Michael, like me, embraces crazy half-baked ideas. And so he was like, yeah, that sounds fun. Let's go for it. Let's see what happens. And so we start this negotiation process. And I'm proud to say we didn't just acquire the paperback, we acquired all the rights to Paper Belt on Fire. And so Infinite Books is going to essentially take over Paper Belt on Fire. We're going to re-release it this September, probably with a different title. I mean, I like Michael and he likes that title, but he's totally open to new titles because we think it, you know, needs to be a little bit zestier. And so, but it's just funny the way these things work out, that this random coffee in New York leads to basically like a multi-year friendship with this person. And he happens to be speaking 3 hours from now. So be nice to him because he's great. And you know, his book is awesome, but wait until September to buy it or buy the new copy. Part of the reason I shared that story is not just because of the coincidence. I mean, it is a pretty striking coincidence, but part of it is because my book, The Founders, is about a company. It's about this company, PayPal. And almost probably all of you have used PayPal. And if you've used Venmo, you've used a product owned by PayPal. If you haven't used the product, which would be surprising, you know the people who are at the heart of its creation. They are, at this point, sort of some of the best known, they are some of the best known people in the world. They are some of the one is the wealthiest person in the world, and then several are in the top 50, let's say. And a lot of what happened in this story is a story of friendship that existed well past the company that they helped to create together. And so PayPal was created in 1998. These friendships exist and thrive to this day. Not everybody, but a lot of these people remain in very, very, very close touch. I'll give you just one small aside of a story. I was interviewing Luke Nosek, who was one of the people that's one of the early co-founders of the company that became PayPal. And I was sitting with Luke in his living room. We were like having pizza or something. We were on like hour 4 of this interview, and he was hugely engaging and very thoughtful and fun and interesting. And his phone starts to ring, and he looks at it, and then he shows it to me. And on the phone, it says Ken Howry. And the reason he had showed me the phone is because Ken was one of the other founders of PayPal in those 1998 and 1999 years. Ken would later go on to become an ambassador. He's also about to become an ambassador for the second time under the Trump administration, ambassador to Denmark this time. And he pointed the phone at me and he said, see, those same people I created PayPal with are still the people that I talk to and do deals with and make things with today. And then he went into the other room to do the call. And these friendships cast a very long shadow on American life. Probably everybody here knows what Elon is up to today, right? But a lot of the people that are in and around that circle first met and joined and worked with each other at PayPal. And so that's part of what makes me think like maybe my friendship with Michael is not accidental. And I think that a lot of what we end up doing is, we hear advice like look for mentors, but I find that the more I advance in my career, it's actually peer-to-peer relationships that end up mattering more than anything else. That was just a really long wind up to the things I'm going to say, and I will keep today relatively informal. What I thought I would do is, authors who speak are always in this very funny position because all the best stuff about what I did for 6 years researching this story is in the book. Like the real nuggets are in the book itself, and I'm going to try to skim some of those nuggets and share some stories and insights. And what I'll do is I will share some of the stories. I will read a little bit from the book so that you all have context for what we're talking about. And then after that, we can just sort of throw open the floor to Q&A. We don't have a ton of time, and I'm happy to stick around after, and I'll be at lunch and all the rest to answer additional questions. But in any case, there's a lot of folks here who are passionate about entrepreneurship. And if there's like a dream team of entrepreneurs, it is the PayPal Mafia. If there's like a Mount Olympus for entrepreneurship, several of these people would end up on that roster. And so there's a kind of interesting quality to this story that I think would resonate more with the people in this room than it will with people in other rooms, let's say. So I'll start with a little selection just so people understand kind of who this group is. Because again, this story is not immediately known to everybody. People hear the phrase PayPal Mafia and they think a certain thing, but I'll just kind of give you some context for what that means. If you have used the internet at all in the last 20 years, you've touched a product, service, or website connected to the creators of PayPal. The founders of several of our era's defining firms, the creators of YouTube, Yelp, Tesla, SpaceX, LinkedIn, and Palantir, among many others, were early PayPal employees. Others occupy top posts at Google, Facebook, and Silicon Valley's leading venture capital firms. Both in the foreground and behind the scenes, PayPal's alumni have built, funded, or counseled nearly every Silicon Valley company of consequence for the last 2 decades. As a group, they constitute one of the most powerful and successful networks ever created. Power and influence captured in the controversial phrase, the PayPal Mafia. Several billionaires and many, many multimillionaires have emerged from PayPal's ranks. The group's combined net worth is higher than the GDP of New Zealand. But to look only at their wealth and impact on technology is to miss the group's wider imprint. PayPal's alumni have built world-changing micro-lending nonprofits, produced award-winning films, written best-selling books, and advised politicians at every level, from the State House to the White House. Sorry, I laugh because I wrote that line before recent events. So it's sort of funny. It's the first time I realized that. And they're far from done. Today, PayPal alumni have taken as a mission everything from cataloging the world's genealogical records to restoring 3 billion acres of forest ecosystems to, quote, scaling love, bringing their PayPal experience to bear in each case. They've also been at the center of the biggest social, cultural, and political controversies of our age, including bitter fights over free speech, financial regulation, privacy and technology, income inequality, the efficacy of cryptocurrency, and discrimination in Silicon Valley. For its admirers, PayPal's founders are a force to be emulated. For its critics, the group represents everything that's wrong with big tech, putting historically unprecedented power into the hands of a small clutch of techno-utopian libertarians. Indeed, it is hard to find a lukewarm opinion about PayPal's founders. They are either heroes or heathens, depending on who renders the judgment. There's a question that I get a lot, kind of, which is, why did I write this book and how did I do it? I will give you the honest answer, particularly in a room of people who are building things, and often enough, you find that you build the things you want, right? You scratch your own itch. For authors, and particularly for my life as an author, this is super easy because market research is just going on Amazon and like typing in the book you want. And if you don't find it, you're like, that's a little odd. If I was going to buy this book and I'm not mean, I'm odd, but I'm not that odd. Like, there's people like me in the world. Why doesn't this book exist? I had this reaction to the PayPal story. I went looking for this book. I went onto Amazon and I typed in PayPal. And the only book I found was a book called The PayPal Wars. And it was written by a gentleman who worked there, Eric Jackson. The problem with a book about a company from one person's perspective is that it's only one person's perspective. And I thought, well, hold on, like, what about the other 300 people that worked at this company? Has anybody talked to them? And it turned out that nobody had really actually gone back and talked to them. In fact, in many of my conversations with these people, their first reaction to me was, nobody's ever asked me about PayPal before. It's been a long time. And that's when I knew I had hit pay dirt. That because they were as successful as they were in other things, if you were sitting in front of them, you wanted to ask about SpaceX. You wanted to ask about Founders Fund. You wanted to ask about YouTube. You didn't go back and ask about this payments company that was started when the internet was still on dial-up modems from 1998 to 2002. The second thing that happened, kind of in addition to getting interviews with these people, and by the way, just so people have a sense of it, the way I got the interviews was partly just stitching introduction to introduction. So I did 300 interviews for the book. Like, some of those were duplicates, but over 6 years interviewed, like, I'm going to say like 100-ish people, maybe 175 people. A couple, again, were duplicates. But I went to Peter Thiel first, and I kind of pitched him the idea for the book. And I said, listen, I think there should be a book about PayPal. My exact line was, I said something like, this is a lot like Lord of the Rings, just much nerdier and set in Silicon Valley in the 1990s. And he liked that a lot. And so he was like, okay, I'm happy to be available for interviews, make a couple of introductions. But I never asked one person for more than 2 introductions. It was actually one of my rules. Because these people are busy, I never asked any one of them to make more than 2 intros. After that, I had this amazing thing happen. And I'll just share this and then maybe a couple of other selections because I'm already kind of running up against the clock. There was a gentleman I interviewed. And at the end of the interview, we had this good discussion. And he looked at me and he said, I think I remember back in my mind, I think I saved all of my PayPal email in these these files, like these old Outlook files. And I think I have it in like a Dropbox folder or something. Is that something you'd want? And right away I had to pretend to act cool. Like I was like, oh yeah, if you happen to have them, I'll take them. That's okay. Great. Inside I'm thinking, oh my God, if I can get this would change the project meaningfully. And so I send him a thank you. He replies and he sends me a Dropbox link. And it is 5 gigabytes of email from that era. And so inside this book is Peter Thiel's note to the company after the September 11th attacks, Elon's resignation note when he is pushed out of the company, which is a very painful time in his life. There are minute-by-minute accounts of board meetings. At one point, Elon contracts malaria and meningitis, and I have the executive discussion about whether he should be allowed back into the office because it's highly contagious. So there's an immediacy and a texture in the book, but that is due in large measure to the fact that I had this massive, massive, massive archive of emails. And it ended up being the greatest thing because memories are very, very fallible. I can't remember what I did last week, right? People can't remember what they did 20 years ago, right? And so what happened is that I could use those emails to reconstruct the story of how this company came to life. I think of this, one of the things about this story that to me is very important is that this group of people were not the people that anybody would have picked out of a lineup to be successful in the conventional sense. One of the things that I think is remarkable about entrepreneurship, about particularly startup entrepreneurship within Silicon Valley, is that it allows people who are eccentric, who are weird, who are oddballs, who don't fit in, to actually make huge successes of themselves. Many of the people who are in this story would have completely flamed out of a more traditional institution. But it is because we have startup entrepreneurship that they can take their wildest ambitions and bring them to life. That can be launching a video platform that today is like one of the backbones of the media ecosystem. It can be launching rockets that may take us to Mars someday. And I think I want to just read one little passage to emphasize some of the kind of weirdness but weirdness with a point, which I'll share after. In many ways, the wisdom of PayPal's hiring only became apparent later, after the company's success validated the early team design. At the time, the founder's logic was more practical than philosophical and driven more by expediency than experience. Quote, "We had to recruit our friends because no one else would work for us," PayPal's future COO David Sachs would later say. From 1994 to 1999, the internet talent pool had gone pro. Companies like Amazon, Google, and Netscape that famously launched in garages, trailers, and dorms now labored from including writing code for the video game software firm Epic Games. Years later, he was traveling across the country when he stopped in Palo Alto to see Levchin, Simmons, and Pan. He was, quote, "He was a true vagabond nomad," Levchin remembered to Pytel. When he arrived at the Infinity office during his stop in California, Pytel wore a pair of tattered water slippers. Quote, "His toes were sticking out," Simmons said. Later, PayPal employees recalled that the decrepit footwear stuck around even as the company thrived. Quote, "They were just the most comfortable shoes I'd gotten in a while," Pytel remembered, "and I just loved them so much that I just wore them everywhere." There are a number of these very funny stories that are part of this broader tale about PayPal. I'll share one more that's not in the book. There was a gentleman I interviewed, and he was telling me, he said, one time I was walking by the office, I was about to go in, and he said, and I saw somebody outside, and they looked very disheveled, long beard, they looked very messy, kind of unkempt, they were smoking. And he said, and I was like, oh man, like, isn't it so sad that we have this like homeless person like right outside our office? Like, this is such a sad thing. And he went inside the office. And then later, this guy comes in, and the person who had made that thought had realized, like, this person, no, he's an employee. He's like an employee who just happens to look this way. Very like, and that employee was Chad Hurley, who was one of the co-founders of PayPal, and later, he was an early employee of PayPal and one of the co-founders of YouTube. I think of this as part of the story, and the important lesson from this story, at least for me, is that appearances can be very deceiving. That some of the best people in startups are some of the people who are like least polished, like least put together. They are the people who are odd, but in their oddness, there's also genius. There is something there. Now, that's not always true. Some people I think are just odd, but in the case of this particular group of people, there is this thing. There's actually a line in the book. Somebody who was one of Elon's HR managers said something to me. There was a group of investors who were going to come and speak with Elon. And this woman said to Elon, you're wearing like a t-shirt and jeans, like you probably want to like put on a suit or like something. And Elon looked at her and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but the quote is in the book. He said, no, because he said, if they judge me by my clothing, then these are not the people that we want to invest in this. Like, it's the idea and the firm and the product that matters. And she said that always stuck with her, right? And again, I don't think these are hard and fast rules. I think that there are some times when social conventions work for a reason, but there is something about startup entrepreneurship that allows people who would not productively fit into any other area of economic life to find a home. I had some other things I was gonna talk through and read, but I'll just kind of finish with one of the thoughts that Max Levchin had. And one of the things that I took away from doing this work and doing this story, I'm really just racing through this because we ran out of time, but I'll also leave time for Q&A. I was not an entrepreneur when I came into this story. I had done what might be regarded as like entrepreneurship as an adjective, in the sense that my books were books that weren't in the world and I needed to create them from scratch, right? It's really that's what entrepreneurship is. It's creating something from scratch you want to see in the world. But I came away with a huge amount of respect for what it takes to do this work and to do it well. And part of what I discovered was just how much these people had to work, how much rigor they had to bring to the work, like the team that they had to assemble, how they had to manage conflicting personalities. You know, you have a room with people like Reid Hoffman and Elon Musk and David Sachs, and these are not harmonious rooms. There's a lot of disagreement in these rooms. And to do this, and to do it during the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000, when 84% of the value of the NASDAQ is wiped out, when people are literally writing headlines that are like, the internet's a fad, it's like the internet's done, this is over, right? To do that, and then to continue to make the company successful in the face of fraud, in the face of hackers, in the face of state attorney generals investigating them, and then to take on eBay in the way they did, which we can talk about a little bit, and then to take the company public, it's really extraordinary. And there are so many moments in this story where the bottom feels like it's going to fall out. And I think that's one of the reasons why entrepreneurs who have read this book have texted me to say that it feels like therapy. Because even these people, even some of the richest, most powerful entrepreneurs in the world had moments of profound doubt, near failure, and actual failure. And that's why I'll sort of end with the final thought I have in the book. It's not really a spoiler because you kind of know how the story ends, but PayPal's earliest employees reserve their highest praise for those who tread the same hard road. Founders across various fields of endeavor. Quote, those that bring the big ideas into hard, unpredictable reality are the practitioners, the high leverage ones, and I admire them almost without reservation, Max Levchin wrote on a personal blog years after PayPal. Quote, one key ingredient of being this kind of person is an almost irrational lack of failure, a lack of fear of failure and irrational optimism. But there is also a more tactical side there too. They manage to not get caught up in all the little details while being remarkably aware of the really important ones. By that point in his life, Max Levchin had ushered several ideas into, quote, hard, unpredictable reality. And yet he ended with an earnest request for advice. Quote, there must be many more essential ingredients to being high leverage. I'd love to understand this type of person better so I can maximize my own leverage. Have any tips? And with that, we can just throw open the floor to questions and go from there.
Thank you so much, Jimmy, for this incredible session to take us through the stories of PayPal and the visionaries who created it. So now I'll be opening up for Q&A. We don't have much time, so we can take 2-3 questions. Let's go. Let's give someone else the chance if you don't mind. Yeah. Okay, who? Okay, yo, one over here, and then we can go there.
Jimmy, thank you so much for everything that you just told us. I think it was a very strong message at the beginning, talking about a story of friendship relating to PayPal's story, basically. I really wanted to know, for some of us, we might have the belief that doing business with close friends, it's hard and risky.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really hard to separate friendship from business. So in your experience and in your research and in your writing of the book, what do you think are the keys for this example you gave us to successfully build an amazing company while keeping the friendship strong?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. I'm not, it's funny, there's actually a section of the book I'm tempted to read, but for the sake of time, I won't. There is something about what Peter Thiel calls the prehistory of a founding team that he looks for when he invests. And what he means by that is, how much, like, before starting this company, what did these people do together? What do they know about each other? Like, how much time did they actually spend together? Also known as, like, are these people actually friends with each other, or at a minimum friendly? And the reason he says this, and the reason others in the book shared their experience of this with me, is because it's not about liking each other, it's about trust. And the thing about our friends is that over time, we trust them. We regard them, I mean, hopefully, I mean, like, maybe you don't, but then, you know, maybe find some new friends. But you regard them as dependable. You regard them as people you might turn to for advice. When you're in a hard spot, you call your friend, right? And so one of the things that happens in this book is that these people, particularly the early group, not everybody, by the way, I don't want to make any like, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. When the company is 230 people in Palo Alto and several hundred more in Omaha, not all of these people are friends with each other. But early on, what grounded their friendship was a high degree of trust. And so what in the book, one of the things that happens is this engineer tells me, he says, you know, what trust allows for is speed. He says, because it means you don't have to have 14 meetings before you make a decision. And if I pass you the ball on something, if I know you well enough, I know that you're going to, like, get things done, right? And so there are dangers for sure in doing business with friends. But in PayPal's case, the benefits far outweighed the dangers. And I would say one of the biggest benefits is that intellectually, all of these people are kind of at the highest level, right? And the only people that people like that are going to be friends with are also people who are like intellectually at that level, right? And so, for example, Peter Thiel and Reid Hoffman, right? So you have people who couldn't be more different politically, but they became very, very, very good friends at PayPal. And one of the things that Peter told me is he said that part of what like Reid was so smart that like even if I disagreed with him, I knew that he would be a valuable addition to the team, right? Same goes for David Sacks. A lot of people disagreed with David Sacks, but he is a bright bulb and he burns very brightly. Max Levchin, you look at just like the constellation of talent, and these are kind of otherworldly IQs. They all also happen to be friends, right? And so there's a way in which like self-selecting for your friends, you're self-selecting for a set of character traits. And it's quite possible that those character traits also make, at least with this particular group of people, for a healthy startup founding team. But again, there's more about that in there, because it was one of the things that I was really wondering about was like, how do you do business with friends without wanting to kill each other? And one of the things that emerges from the book is no, actually what it allows for is just a high degree of speed. And you need speed when you're underfunded, taking on incumbents, and like you don't have any other advantages other than speed.
Hey, Jimmy, right here.
Oh, all right.
I was just wondering how deeply knowing this story informs sort of like your own creative journey and brand building.
Oh, that's interesting. No one's ever asked me that before, actually. You know, I would say that, like, in a way, creating this book, like, I hit a lot of hurdles. Like, it was just like grueling. I mean, it was mid-pandemic. I had a small kid at home. Like, there was a lot going on. I've done all my books while working full time, so I'm sort of eking them out in the mornings and on weekends and stuff. And so, you know, honestly, it was just like telling these stories and learning more about them. The biggest thing it gave me, if it gave me one gift, it was just a kind of irrational grit and a willingness to like put everything else to the side in order to just focus on the things that matter to me most. And so it was really funny. My friends joked. They were like, yep, Jimmy's in his writing cave. Like, I just like did not do anything for years. I'll tell you one story. There was a night, like my friends had planned a birthday party, and a source of mine, a friend of mine, had gotten a book that was coming out that was about Peter, and I needed to know what was in it because it was coming out before mine. So if he had gotten some fact I didn't know, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. And it was like an early copy of the book. And like I had to like go from Brooklyn to Manhattan to get this. And it was like a really big deal and whatever. So I texted my friends, I was like, guys, birthday's off. I'll like see you when I see you. And they totally understood. They were like, nah, this is just Jimmy's process. He's like totally focused on this thing. And I would say that like part of the casualty of startup life is you will have to make those sacrifices, right? And I'm not comparing my experience at all to startup entrepreneurship, which again is a more team-based, more dynamics. But in my case, you asked the question, what imprint did this leave on me? How does it affect my working life? I recognize that bringing anything into the world is an act of madness. It is an act of madness and total conviction and total devotion. And so I know that I am built for that. I can go years without seeing friends and be okay. I can wake up every day at 4 a.m. and be okay. That is just how I'm wired. And I stopped feeling bad, guilty, or frustrated by that when I did this PayPal story, because I recognized actually that is the difference between some of these people and many other people in this ecosystem who won't be able to achieve something similar, because it is, I hate to say it, it's simply what is required.
Okay, we can take one more question.
I think we can sneak in two. I'll keep it brief, and then we can continue at lunch and whatever.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm studying business analytics here. And I have a question regarding like to tie between the last session and this session related to AI. As an author and a storyteller, how have you used AI and plan to use AI in the future?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit different from other authors in that I think AI is fantastic. I think it's great. It's like the best research assistant I've ever had in my life. It's amazing. Like it blows my mind almost on a daily basis, right? My AI tool of choice is Claude. I love Otter AI, OTTER.ai for transcriptions. I'm using a couple of others and playing around with things, but those are my two primary ones. I like Whisper Flow too. That's pretty good, but it's got some quirks and there's some privacy concerns. But again, per the gentleman's earlier comments, who knows if anything is private. I'm a fan of it as a as a tool. And I think that what it does is it accelerates your ability as an author to just like get things out into the world. It also allows me to harmonize like interviews that are a little bit different, or like, I do so many interviews for my book that it's often just the case I have so much raw material. It's like hard to make heads and tails of it. And AI can do a very, very good job of helping me do that, right? It forces me, and I think it should force everybody to think about what is the thing you're doing that can't be AI'd out of existence, right? So I spend a lot of time thinking about that question now. What are the things that I am uniquely able to do? I'm working on a book about Steve Jobs right now. And I can tell you that the thing I'm uniquely able to do is to travel to crazy places to meet these like people who are a part of Steve Jobs' life, who live in the middle of nowhere, and sit down with them and get them to tell me their stories for 2 and 3 hours. AI is good. We're years away from AI being able to do that successfully. And so it forces me. So I would say, to answer your question, one, I think it's great. It's like the best accelerant ever. And I have a research assistant who never gets tired, right? It's amazing. And on the other hand, I'm thinking, what are the things that I'm doing that are specific and unique to me? Like, what is my actual value here? So let's do one more. This is fun. You guys are asking really good questions. These are great questions.
Last one.
Hello, I'm Abi. I'm an MBA student here. So I think the story of founders just showcases how bright people can come together to build something really valuable. Like in this situation, I'm sure like while you're uncovering their stories, you figure out how they became friends. Was it the proximity, like where they were, like, or the ideas they were pursuing that ended up bringing them together as friends to work on it now?
I'll give it a bit of a texture. I mean, look, ultimately, it's a little from column A, a little from column B. Let me see if I can go into that more, just so I don't like leave you with just that. I would say in some cases it's proximity. So there are 2 big alumni groups that become a big core part of the company. One alumni group are Stanford alums, Peter's friends and contacts and colleagues and people he did things with at Stanford, who become a kind of pipeline into the company that he builds. Another is the University of Illinois, whose engineering school is very, very well regarded. Max Levchin is a graduate of that school, so he actually just brings in people from there, right? So there's a little bit of just like that, those sorts of networks matter a great deal. The second thing that happens is that there are people who come in and then they just pull in people in their network, right? Like friends and others. At the beginning, that's very difficult because the internet is hot and this company is not. And so it's actually kind of tough. Later, when the bubble bursts, the funny thing that happens is that everybody wants to work at PayPal because it's one of the only companies left standing, right? So they have kind of their ability to pick from the cream of people. I would say the kind of other way to get into the question is there were questions that they asked and things that this team did when they were recruiting and interviewing that not a lot of other companies did. So like I remember this one person was like, one of the goofiest things about the PayPal interview process is that they would ask you your SAT score. This person was just like, what does my SAT score have to do with anything, right? But it was kind of this ruthlessly meritocratic place. And maybe that was one signal for whether you took the SAT seriously. And I don't know. But it was just really funny because she remembered, she was like, I was in my 20s. Like, I don't even remember my SAT score. Like, Peter and David are asking, what is your SAT score? They did other things. They would do puzzle tests. So I have all these puzzles in the book that are tests that Max and Peter, math problems that they would throw at people, right? And they would throw them, by the way, not just at technical candidates, but at non-technical candidates too. So there's this guy I interviewed, Jack Selby. They threw a puzzle question at him and he was great. He was so funny. And he just looks at them and goes, listen, here's the deal. I'm not going to do this puzzle. You either want to hire me or you don't, but I don't know how to do this stuff. So if that's a deal breaker, like I've got other things I can do. And they were like, that's a pretty good answer. They were like, they bring him aboard. And he actually ends up being very, very valuable because his skill is not solving elaborate math puzzles. It is business development and it is negotiation around fundraising. And so I realize I just threw a lot at you, but I think it is the case that like there were this network was built partly on affinity, partly on personal connection, partly on total luck and happenstance, partly on, I'll give you one final story and then we'll stop because I know you guys have to eat lunch and stuff, and the speaker is never supposed to stand in the way between an audience and food. That's like one cardinal rule. So there's this guy that becomes a really important part of the story. And he meets this other person, this investor. And this investor says, hey, I got this guy, Elon. He's like working on some finance thing. You're in finance. You're like looking for your next thing. Why don't I connect you guys over email? So he does, connects him over email. So this investor sends a note. Elon's like, I want to meet you. When can you be here? And he says, oh, I'll be in your area. Like I'm in LA or whatever. I'll be in your area like sometime in the next few weeks. He says, no. I'm sending you a ticket. Can you fly out tonight? And this guy was like, that's a little weird, but okay, fine, I'll go. So he goes, he flies out from LA to Palo Alto that evening. He gets to the office at, I think it was like 7 o'clock or something like in the evening. And Elon says, let's go out to dinner. So they go out to this burger place that's down the street from the office. They stay there until it closes and after. So they're there at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And Elon looks at him and says, can you come in at 4 a.m. to get your offer letter? I want you to join the company. And this guy's like, well, I don't know. He's like, no, just come at 4. Just get your offer letter and then we can talk about everything after that, right? And so he stays the night and he comes to the office at 4 o'clock in the morning and he goes back, talks things over with his wife, and he ends up joining the company and he becomes a really important part of its success. There is the other answer to your question is that particularly in the case of Elon, if he saw somebody that he wanted, he was relentless about bringing them on board. And he would do exactly what I just described, which is go for broke right away, make the offer, get them on board. And so the answer to your question is, it's a multiple choice answer. Depends on the person, depends on the situation.